Alright, now before we jump into the new hat, I want to start with this. My first alpaca felt hat. In my last video, I didn't actually show myself wearing it, and a lot of you asked to see it on. So here I go. Here it is, my first completed handmade felt hat, straight from raw alpaca fiber, and honestly, I love it. But it's got some problems. See these thin spots? Yeah, that's where I learned that no matter how much I prepare, turning raw fiber to felt creates weak, thin, uneven, and even patchy felt. Take a look at this brim. It was weak at some points and patchy at the top of the crown. So this is where we're at today, and this is the next hat. Black alpaca fiber from another one of my alpacas, but this time I've already felted and stretched the fiber over a block. If you want to see how I got here, from raw fleece to this point, and your curiosity compels you, make sure you check out my last video where I walk you through the entire process. Now I hit this stage and thought, great, here we go again. Holes in the crown and spots on the brim. I really thought that I had fixed these mistakes. Now at this point, I either end up with another patchy hat or scrap this entire fiber, which would be a huge waste. But then I had an idea into needle felting, and I thought this could be my solution. So I grabbed a regular sewing needle, threw some raw fiber onto the hat, and started stabbing away. The results? Absolutely nothing. Turns out there's a reason needle felting needles are different. So I ran to Hobby Lobby and picked one up. I realized that those needles have tiny barbs on them, tiny hooks that actually grab the fiber and push them down into the felt. Plus, this little gadget uses 5 needles at once, which means I can press raw fiber into the thin spots a lot faster. Now, when I said in theory it should go faster, it was just a theory. This takes so long. And since this part takes so long, let me introduce you to the alpacas that made these hats possible. Meet Corin, Ansley, and Finley. My 3 alpacas. And it's these 3 dudes that I'm getting all of my fiber from. And it works, it just takes forever. The hat, it feels pretty solid now. The holes are filled and the surfaces are even. Now with that done, let's take it back to wet felting and see if we can make this a cohesive fabric. I'm doing this step again because I wanted to take those loose fibers that were just pressed in to actually entangle with the original felt. And look at that, the problem areas look way better now. The needle felting trick totally worked. And now with that finished, I'm taking a new step when it comes to the brim. Last time I didn't really focus on how I shaped the felt when laying out the brim, and that caused a lot of waves and wrinkles. So here's a tip. The direction you rub felt is the direction it shrinks. If you rub toward the crown, it pulls the brim in. So I'm rubbing around the brim in a circle to shrink it evenly between the wrinkles and smooth out the brim. Another step I'm changing from the first hat is how I'm going about and cutting the brim. This time I'm adding shellac to the hat before I cut the brim. Adding shellac first gives it structure and helps me get a clean, straight brim. Once it dried, I pulled up my halfway put together brim cutter. Yeah, still a work in progress, and used it to cut the brim. But even this halfway done tool made this brim a lot nicer. If you're curious on how I'm making this cutter, let me know down in the comments. It's another handmade tool, kind of like everything else in this process. Alright, now we're inside at the sewing machine. This time, I want to experiment with keeping this hat stiff. My previous hat took on a fedora style just by me taking it on and off of my head. The fiber naturally folds and takes shape even by you touching it. So this time, I'm going to add a cardboard stiffener inside. That should help hold its clean, boxy shape I'm going for. I'm also going to be covering the cardboard with an inside liner so you can't see it. Using the hat itself as a template, I got to shaping the cardboard. Then I cut and sewed together some fabric from a cotton shirt. Then I fitted it to the cardboard and slid that liner right into place. Now to cut and sew in a sweatband. After adding the sweatband, I tried on the hat, and honestly, not good. The cardboard made it too stiff, and it didn't mold to my head the way I wanted. So I'm scrapping the idea and trying something else. I've got all this leftover thick fiber for my brim, and we're gonna use that instead of the cardboard. The cardboard wasn't a waste. I could still use it to make a template for the new liner. Rather than making a whole new felt sheet, I'm using my needle felting trick from earlier to stitch together these scrap pieces of fiber. Now that the pieces are connected, I can stitch together the felt pieces, add the checkered liner to the felt, and then place everything inside of the hat. That is a much nicer fit. It molds to my head way better than the cardboard did. One last thing is to add a brim guard. This will help the hat keep its shape and prevent the edges from fraying. I'm also adding a special metal piece along the brim. It should help the hat hold its shape over time, making the brim sturdier while I'm doing farm chores and working with my cows. I quickly stitched around the metal just to secure it. The next part is to add the actual brim liner, and for that we're going to use leather. Cutting the sheets of leather so it's a good diameter around the hat. I was planning on using this kind of trident thing to stamp the leather so I could sew it easier because I don't really have a lot of patience when it comes to hand sewing. But because the leather is suede, it didn't show the markings very well and I had to hand sew anyway. I tried to get the stitching perfect and even, but again, I'm not patient with this part. And after another long and tedious process, we now have a brim liner around the hat. But I don't really like that this color is so bright, so I need to change it. I'm adding some polish around the hat to actually dye the leather. At this point, you might be wondering why not just buy black leather? I have a wife and a lot of kids. That means budget. And this piece of leather just so happened to be on an incredible discount. Black leather is just dyed leather anyway, so I figure I'm just taking an extra process on myself. One great thing about the polish is that it hides my uneven stitch marks. And with this part finished, we can move on to the comparison and reveal. And yes, I will wear it this time. Here are the two hats side by side. Let's call the first one a dabble and the second one a dive. There's clearly a difference in the quality of the two. The first brown hat is still very wrinkly, and the brim was weak and fraying originally, so after the previous video, I actually added this felt piece thinking that it would blend well. It didn't, and it was harder to cut. So moving on to something like leather, I think was a great idea. This time I spent a lot more time getting rid of the wrinkles from the brim, and it shows. The newer black hat looks way nicer and cleaner. On the first hat, I did add twine around the crown. This is cool because it actually comes from the bales of hay that I used to feed my alpacas, but this leather band is way cleaner on the new one. I do like the liner on the inside of the new hat, and if I make another one in the future, I'll upscale this even more, adding silk on the inside. And now to put the hat on, here it is. It looks great, feels great, and it's very comfortable. I'm so glad that I got rid of the cardboard and replaced it with a thicker piece of felt. And now that it's on, you be the judge and tell me what you think about this hat, especially in comparison to the first. It's so cool to think that this fiber came directly from this alpaca. Seeing it on me was cool, but can I get the alpaca to wear it? I don't think so. But as a consolation, he can eat out of it. Since you liked this video and you were still here at the end, make sure that you check out my previous video where I go more in depth about the entire process to get the fiber into felt and make the hat in full.